devil, it includes sub-characters within that character that are like garden and tempter and that type of stuff. And I know the Answers in Genesis site has this up there saying that this demonstrates that these 4,000-year-old characters, that people in China were aware of the creation story. Is that what your point was?
They were aware of the Jewish creation story, you're saying?
Yeah, that's the argument, that the nature of these characters for the word for devil is such that the person who created that character was aware of the Jewish creation story. Is that?
Okay, yeah, okay. Okay, I kind of misinterpreted what you were saying at first. Okay, but
so this is a question to you. Is this what you were talking about?
That's what you were talking about?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what? I mean, there's three possible.
I just think it's interesting.
There's three possible explanations. Either somebody who invented that character in the ancient Chinese writings was familiar with the Jewish creation myth and wanted to pass that along. That kind of makes sense, that you make a character that relates to the story. That's kind of the way Chinese works, although I'm not an expert. So that's one possibility, that the person who created that character was familiar with those stories. The other possibility is that people are seeing patterns in those characters, and that Chinese language in particular lends itself to finding patterns of words and other words. I'd say that that's also viable, considering that you can walk into any marketing department in China, and what they end up doing is twisting and turning their characters into new fonts so that you portray more message and people read more into it than what the actual character's for. And the third possibility is that the Genesis account, the Jewish creation myth, is true, and that the God of the Jews decided to reveal this to a Chinese guy as well. Now, of the three, which is the least likely?
You see, now, if you ask me, the last option is the most likely, because
why?
This is going along with ancient Chinese, and these symbols supposedly predate any Jewish civilization.
Well, how is that possible? Doesn't that contradict your Bible? Wasn't the Jewish civilization the first?
Well, no, the Jewish civilization didn't always exist. That's something that came along after.
No. My next question would be okay, if somehow this creation story influenced China somehow, ancient China, what else you got except a character?
No, we don't go do an okay and go on to that.
No, okay.
The reason is you're saying that it's more likely of those three possibilities that a God did it, and then you're saying that it's because the character predates Jewish culture. Well, that's in direct violation with what the Bible has to say. I mean, Adam and Eve, the formation.
This is what I'm saying. The Hebrews did not exist at the
so
first time of creation.
So what?
They exist.
So what? The story did.
It's a little coincidental that the Chinese characters existed before the Jews even existed.
No. Okay, I apologize, Hal. You're being an idiot about this, and here's why. The story existed. If the story was true or not, the story existed. Are you saying that the story didn't exist for the Hebrews until after the Chinese invented the character? How is that possible?
That's what I've heard, is that these characters existed before the Hebrews came along and
let's think for a second.
Wrote down their stories.
Let's think for a second. If the Chinese character existed before the story existed, then clearly the story can't be true. Because if the story is true, then this is the story that was passed along from father to son, from Adam all the way to Moses. Now, those two things are in direct contradiction. Either this story existed within the zeitgeist of Hebrew culture before the nation of Jews became extant, or it did not. And if it did, then it's no surprise that a Chinese person might have found out about it and created a character. And if it didn't, then it's irrelevant that China has a character for this.
Well, you see,
it's
this is the point I'm getting at, though, right here, is that the Chinese, even though they were an isolated civilization from the Hebrews and stuff, and they existed before the Hebrews, and these characters were in existence before the stories came up. And what I'm saying is, though, is that they were already aware of the creation account.
So the Chinese existed before the Hebrews, and they were aware of God's creation of the Hebrews.
Of the whole world.
Well, but, oh, wow. All right, let me backtrack.
The Hebrews weren't the only people that got created.
Wow. Let me backtrack, because what I tried to demonstrate is called a reductio ad absurdum, that you take the premises as granted and you demonstrate that they lead to a contradiction. And your premises were such that the Chinese character for devil, for example, predates Jewish culture. Right?
Yes.
How is that possible if the Bible is true? The formation of a Hebrew nation comes afterwards, but the story of the creation follows those characters from Adam through Moses. It doesn't matter that we hadn't put a label on a Hebrew culture yet. If the Bible story... What?
Okay, I'll let you finish.
If the Bible story is true, which is what you're arguing by saying that the Chinese knew about it before the Hebrews, then that is self-refuting, because the Hebrews would have known the whole time. It doesn't matter what they were called. From Adam to Moses, this is a tradition.
He seems to be saying the story predates Adam, which is crazy, right?
Okay.
Did Adam know the story?
Did Adam?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Did Adam's children know the story?
I'm sorry, did Adam what?
Did Adam's children know the story?
Yes.
And we're all descended from Adam's, including both the Chinese and the Hebrews, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how could the Chinese story predate the reality that it's coming from, that you're arguing for?
Well, you see, this is what I'm saying. Sure, I mean, the Hebrews weren't aware of it, before Moses, but the Chinese, though, they had kept the story going, and they eventually lost it again.
Okay.
Supposedly, Moses was a descendant of Adam.
They recorded it through their symbols.
Okay. So, one of the descendants of Adam and Eve eventually became Chinese, remembered the story and taught it to maybe, let's say, the Egyptians, who then taught it to Moses, and then Moses wrote it down, and then it became the story of the Jews.
Well, I don't know about that. Did the Chinese ever encounter the Egyptians?
Well, I don't know.
And all of this is
Wouldn't
more likely than a mind game?
Yeah, you're saying that the mere fact that this Chinese character, which kind of maps to a character in the Jewish stories, predates the earliest Jewish record of these stories, means that it's more likely that a god revealed all of this to the Chinese. And you're doing this despite the fact that this god in the story somehow didn't choose the Chinese as his chosen people.
Well, the Chinese back in those days just pretty much still carried on the story, but among the Hebrew people, they lost it. But then you can read like Exodus and stuff, and that's when they become God's chosen people. And
you think that's all more likely than the other two options?
I do. I just find it too coincidental.
Oh, so your argument, okay. Because when I started the show, my primary question was, do you care whether or not what you believe is true? And you're claiming that you do care, but your argument is that this is too coincidental. It's too unlikely to have happened any other way than by divine intervention. And I wonder by what criteria you have made a determination that divine intervention is the best explanation, other than your own befuddlement at other possibilities.
It's all on the assumption that the ancient Chinese were isolated from the Middle Eastern and Semitic cultures. Now, if somebody comes up to me and shows me that they did encounter each other before these symbols were created, then I'll accept that right there. But just like I said, right now I'm assuming
the story you're accepting necessarily draws that conclusion. Let me break this down for you. You just said if somebody demonstrates evidence that the Chinese came into contact with them prior to then. And let's start at Adam, because we're accepting your story as true, and then it branches down, which means they've always been connected. They are all the result of the same tree.
Well, yeah. I'm saying, but after all that, like before the symbols were created, and people can show just not like by biblical accounts.
Basically, you have no clue what you're talking about, but you evaluated three prospects and concluded that a divine intervention is more likely than human error, or that one guy met another guy and wanted to